Hey there, I'm Mr. Terry, a high school history teacher. Welcome back to another History Teacher Reacts video. All right, we're back with part 2 of Oversimplified's two-part series on the First Punic Wars. Now, obviously, if you didn't see part 1, you're going to want to check that out first and then come back over here. So I realized after I watched the first episode that this wasn't just Punic Wars, it was the First Punic War. So there's a lot of stuff later on that happens in the war that becomes famous that this series probably will not get to, like Hannibal. Nevertheless, though, there's so much content here in the Punic Wars that doing 2 just on the first war is plenty. So I learned a ton from the first video. I'm excited to learn more from the second video. Of course, I'm going to give you my commentary, try to add some context, and have some fun with you along the way. All right, as always, the link is down below to the original video. Give it the view, the like, the subscription, and let's get back into the series.
After the gigantic battle at Cape Ecnomus, the Romans were now free to land on African soil. And so, they did. The Carthaginians chose to focus on defending the city of Carthage itself. So the Romans immediately took the city of Aspis, and were then free to raid and plunder the countryside. They took over 20,000 slaves, and a ton of booty. But then...
Roman slavery is huge. People often forget it's like a third of their society is slaves.
Some orders arrived from the Senate. Send home the booty. Oh, but I want to stay. No, Steve, not you. They mean the treasure.
The booty, okay?
Well, we are not watching any more of this filth. So the other consul left with the booty.
I can't show this in my class.
His forces on their own, and they began advancing towards Carthage. Along the way, according to the ancient writer Livy, they encountered a literal dragon. Now, Livy was a Roman historian, so his account may be slightly exaggerated, but this, I believe. As the Romans continued to plunder, the Carthaginian people flooded into the city. Now, not only was it in a major panic, but it was so crowded, the people began to starve. Don't panic, everyone! Look, I know you're all starving, but
this guy was crappy motivating before.
For me. So, you know, it's not all bad. Whoa! You're wasting your tomatoes! You idiots wonder why you're starving? Oh well, it's just more food for me! Things weren't looking...
Actually, Mr. Terry, the tomatoes would not have existed in this part of the world as they had not come over from the Americas yet.
Good for Carthage. They had to do something to
Which one of you was typing that in the chat?
Throughout their land. So they decided, finally, it was time to put an end to it. They headed out and set up on rough hilly terrain overlooking the Roman camp, and they prepared for battle. Now, while the Carthaginians were the traditional masters of the sea, on land, they weren't always the brightest. Case in point, setting up in this position, overlooking the Roman camp, was just about the stupidest thing they could have done. Why? Well, there's something you gotta understand about Carthage. The Carthaginian land forces actually suffered from a multitude of different issues. First of all, since the Carthaginians were rich, they could afford to pay a huge number of foreign mercenaries to fight for them.
Are they gonna
These
show up, though?
mercenaries actually made up the vast majority
they had
of
to pay
Carthage's
outsiders.
forces, and therefore, Carthage's land armies were a melting pot of many different cultures.
Remember, mercenaries are only going to be as loyal as the money. They have no stake in this fight. So can you trust them? Well, only if they trust you with the pay.
This, however,
see it all the time
if
in
the
history.
battle wasn't going their way, there could be loyalty issues. Man, I ain't getting paid enough for this.
I mean, seriously, look at the end of the Roman Empire. I mean, the Roman Empire, especially in mainland Europe, heavily relied on foreign non-Romans, right? Which is a lot of people in Rome because it was so dang big, to be in their military, though. And those people would be far more loyalty to the paycheck or to their general than the idea of the Roman Empire. And there's the enemy at the gates, saying, but an even more powerful one is enemy within the gates. Rome's going to get a piece of that later on in history.
You Balearic slingers better not be thinking of running away. What did he say? I don't know, man. I don't speak Phoenician. Let's get out of here. Clearly, there were also language issues. The military generals tended to be Carthaginian, but they made a lot of strange decisions. For example, one of the most feared assets of the Carthaginian army were the war elephants. To a Roman soldier who had never even seen an elephant before, this was like fist fighting, a literal monster. Yet the Carthaginians continually kept placing the elephants in the rear, where they were no use.
Gonna be big later in future Punic Wars too.
In a similar fashion, the neighboring region of Numidia provided Carthage with the most skilled cavalrymen in the world. But the Carthaginians often chose to fight on rough, uneven terrain, where horses and elephants were less effective. And so, in this case, when the Carthaginians again chose the rough terrain near the Roman camp, the Romans easily sent them packing. Wow, Regulus. We're mere miles from Carthage.
The booty guy.
You sure are amazing. Yes, Steve. I know. Steve? What's the matter? We've almost won. I just wish I could be as great as you, Regulus. Steve, you're amazing. I mean, look at this thing. It's unbelievable. I know, but I mean like at war stuff. I'm such a noob. My tanks always get blown up. I can't even fly an aircraft straight. Tanks? Aircraft? What are you talking about, Steve?
For a while.
I'm talking about free-to-play online multiplayer combat game, and this video's sponsor, War Thunder. War Thunder! War Thunder is the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made. Don't just drive the tank, become one with the tank. You can play as more than 2,000 battleships, aircraft, tanks, and helicopters in dynamic player versus player combat. With amazing 4K graphics, each vehicle is incredibly detailed and modeled down to their individual components. And for history nerds like you and I, the vehicle collection in War Thunder spans over 100 years of military development, from the 1920s to the present day. I love the detailed damage mechanics in War Thunder. You ever think about how the exact angle a shell hits an armored vehicle affects the resulting damage? War Thunder has. Every bullet and shell is simulated with realistic destruction. That's the kind of thing that gets me up in the morning. And by using my link in the description below, new and existing users can get an exclusive oversimplified decal to make their T-50 tank look extra spicy.
That's actually kind of cool.
You'll get a huge bonus pack, including premium vehicles and boosters. So play War Thunder now on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation. And as always, by using my link, you'll be supporting my channel. So thank you.
Okay.
Now where were we? Oh yeah. Invading Africa, getting some booty, sending the Carthaginians packing. Everything was looking up for Regulus. A Roman victory seemed like it was only a matter of time. But then, Regulus realized something. He had been consul for almost a year, and his term was coming to an end.
Wrap it up.
He knew that if his successor took over and he finished the job,
I get the
then
credit.
he would get the naked statues, not Regulus.
No.
And there was no way Regulus
the
was
naked
going to
statues?
allow that. So he jumped the gun. You there, Carthaginian boy. I want you to deliver a message to your elders. I, Marcus Attilius Regulus, demand the total and unconditional surrender of Carthage. Unconditional surrender? Jeez, at least lay siege and starve us all to death first. Just deliver the message!
They're already trying that.
He demands your total surrender. What? Jeez, at least lay siege and starve us all to death first. Hey,
it's not to that point yet, huh?
Well, boys, this Roman thinks we're out. But we're not out, are we, boys? No! We'll do what we always do in times like this. Hire somebody else to solve our problems for us.
Oh!
Darren, bring
Who's
in
left?
the Spartan.
Right.
Regulus's overly harsh demands had the unintended effect of reinvigorating Carthaginian resolve. They brought in a mercenary from the famed land of Sparta named Xanthippus to help dig them out of this situation. And we all know what Spartans are like.
Yeeting people into holes. War.
Xanthippus showed up and immediately took charge. He had a look around and said, "You idiots, put the elephants in front of the army so they can smash into the Romans. And stop fighting on rough, uneven terrain. Find a big flat field so your superior cavalry can do their job. And what's this I hear about you giving a speech telling everyone they're gonna die? Hey, I was just telling the people the truth. You're a politician. Lie to the people."
Based.
And so Xanthippus led out the newly reformed Carthaginian army to meet Regulus in the Battle of the Bagradas River. The elephants, now in the front, smashed into the Roman lines, causing disarray.
Hey, I mean, they were talking about tanks earlier. I always refer in my class to tanks as elephants as ancient tanks. They really were.
The cavalry, with total freedom of movement, outflanked the Roman infantry. Thanks to this impressive
Give them a
Spartan,
flanking spanking.
the battle was a total Carthaginian victory. And Xanthippus,
Let's
for
go.
his stunning victory, was
Let's
forced
go.
to flee Carthage because the leadership got jealous.
Boo.
Regulus, the Roman consul, was captured during the battle. Legend has it, he was
Rip.
brought before the Carthaginian council, and they made a proposition.
Why?
Well, Reggie, not looking so good anymore, is it? Looks like we beat
Why
you
give
pretty
him an
bad,
option?
huh? Up yours, you
Oh,
Punic pansies! Now, Regulus. Nobody likes a sore loser, do they? No. How about this? We're gonna send you back to Rome, and you convince the Roman Senate to surrender to us. If you fail, though, you gotta come back so we can torture you to death, okay? Okay. You promise? I promise.
Pinky swear.
Hey guys. Whoa,
Like old
Regulus.
Jenga?
We thought you got captured. I did, but they sent me back to convince you to surrender. Well, should we? Surrender? No, never surrender. Give them hell, boys. They're at the end of their rope. Anyway, I gotta go be tortured to death now. What? Yep, part of a deal I made.
Does he go back?
Long story. Oh, hey, wait, Regulus. No,
I don't
it's
know
cool,
this.
guys. I promised. Regulus. This is ancient times. We massacre entire populations. We chop pets in half. You can
Once you
break a
chop pets in
promise.
half,
No,
anything's on the
Tim.
table.
You never break a promise. That's too far. And so, Regulus went back to Carthage and was tortured to death.
Wow.
And for keeping his promise, he was immortalized as the leading symbol of Roman virtue. Meanwhile, after
They really
defeat
do
in
the
Africa, the
smashing
remaining
with
Roman
spikes?
survivors still in Africa were still in Africa, and they needed to be rescued. So the Romans sent their fleet to pick him up and bring him home. They successfully fended off a Carthaginian fleet, grabbed the survivors, and made their way to Sicily. A great success. But then, things took a turn for the worse. Sir? That cloud looks kind of angry. Fear not, coward. If we Romans can build a war fleet from scratch and defeat the Carthaginian Empire at their own game, why, then even Mother Nature herself will crumble
Don't piss
before
off
us.
Poseidon.
I laugh in the face
Or
of
Neptune.
Mother Nature. Ha ha! See? Come on, guys. Laugh at Mother Nature with me. Ha ha!
You can't do that.
284 ships, nearly 80% of the Roman fleet
You
was
don't recover from
destroyed.
that either.
As many as 100,000 men drowned in a terrifying act of nature. Never before had Rome lost so many men in a single incident. 100.
See, this is where if you believe in your pantheon of gods, whoever you are, that you're either doing something wrong, you're making them unhappy, or they're on your side. So it's going to have one of either effect there.
1,000 casualties for any other nation would be crippling. Any other nation would hastily sue for peace. Any other nation would spend decades trying to recover. But Rome was not just any other nation.
I don't hear
Infamous
no
for its
bell.
unrelenting determination in the face of overwhelming
Take a break,
odds.
Rome. You're already
Rome said,
losing.
well, I guess we'll just have to build another fleet. And they did. In just 3 months, they built 220 more
Gosh,
ships.
they're good at this
An
now.
astonishing feat. The Romans
Got it
sent out their
down.
brand spanking new war fleet. And
Oh no!
they
Dude,
got
this-
caught in another storm.
Dude, this is like the Mongols. This is like the Mongol invasion of Japan, where this happened twice, where their whole fleet was destroyed and freaking saved the Japanese bacon.
This time, a whole nother fleet was lost. And still, the Romans did not give up. The Carthaginians couldn't believe it. Their enemy had just lost hundreds of thousands of men, had 2 fleets almost entirely destroyed,
Holy smokes.
and they still wouldn't surrender. As one Roman
Just make
poet
'em
put
dumb.
it, the victor is not victorious if the vanquished does not consider himself so.
Oh,
In typical
there we
Roman
go.
fashion, after a short
You didn't
break,
lose if
they
you could
were once again building
convince
another
yourself.
fleet. However, for now, after all the disasters at sea, the focus began shifting back to the land campaign in Sicily. The Carthaginians, overconfident from recent successes, attempted to retake Panormus, but the Romans countered the terrifying war elephants by throwing stuff at them and scaring them away.
Booty. Cans.
Having stopped the Carthaginian advance, the road was now open to the final Carthaginian stronghold on the island, Lilybaeum. Lilybaeum was an extremely
Last part of
well-fortified
Sicily.
city. In 250 BC, the Romans laid siege.
So you can see the Romans had to change their strategy. They were trying to get the Carthaginian capital. Doesn't work. But remember, before going into the Carthaginian capital, they weren't necessarily doing great on Sicily now, but now, yes, they are focusing on that. And that'd be, strategically, you think it'd be very important to control that island for future attacks on Carthage. So we do see a strategy shift now.
The Carthaginian defense, however, was fierce, and skilled blockade runners kept the city supplied. Progress was so slow that the siege would last another 9 years. To make matters worse, the Carthaginians later sent possibly the greatest.
Is it even a siege if it's 9 years? Because like with 9 years, you have a siege in the city, but the city's not going to survive for 9 years without being connected. You know what I mean? Sieging's about so much about disconnecting the city from their supplies, but they were able to somehow keep it up. Is it even a siege at that point?
Military general of the time, a man named Hamilcar Barca, to the island. He engaged in a skillful campaign of guerrilla warfare behind enemy lines, and for the remainder of the war, he was a major thorn in the Roman side. For now, with the deadlock siege at Lilybaeum and the new Roman fleet at sea, things seem to be at a standstill, and the Romans had to do something to break the deadlock. Thankfully, the Roman consul, Clodius Pulcher, had an idea. He tried to get
Pulcher,
things
doesn't
moving
sound
by
very
attacking
Roman,
the
huh?
Carthaginian fleet at Drepana. Now, before a battle, to predict if they would win, it was common for the Romans to look for signs from the gods.
Yep. Back to the Greeks with Oracle at Delphi. They're hoping to find anything, and somehow people that can find, I don't know, some kind of level of prophecy. Can't believe it. You know, wonder how accurate it would be. I know with like the Oracle of Delphi, for example, though, the actual like prophecies used to be so vague that you could pretty much interpret them any way you want, and like keep the oracle from having much like responsibility there, because they're like, that's not what we meant.
This could mean observing the weather or inspecting some cow livers.
Yeah.
You know, typical religion
Isn't
stuff.
it like how the innards look? Isn't that what they do with the animals, like intestines and stuff like that? Like, oh, they're like shifted this way. That means it's an omen. Thought I heard that before.
In this case, Pulcher reportedly tried to feed some sacred chickens, but unfortunately for him,
Sacred
they
chickens.
wouldn't eat a crumb. A very bad sign.
What's wrong with them?
Well, he
Like
said,
a groundhog?
if they won't eat, then let them drink, stupid chickens! We'll observe the weather instead. Gods, give me a sign. Ignore
Obviously, that would look
okay,
bad.
how about this? If I can get this piece of paper into that trash basket, we'll win. Okay, if I can stand here silently for 5 seconds and do nothing, we'll win.
Yeah.
Pulcher chose to ignore the signs from the gods, and in the following battle, the superior Carthaginians tore them to shreds. It also didn't help that by
Get
now the
wrecked,
Romans
Rome.
had removed the corvus to stabilize their ships, and without
Oh,
their
they're
secret
worthless
weapon,
without those.
it was a disaster. And Pulcher was
That's how they won
disgraced.
any
To make matters
naval
worse,
battles.
the victorious Carthaginian fleet then went on to intercept a Roman supply fleet on its way to Lilybaeum. As they approached, however, they
That's
saw
awkward.
the signs of an incoming storm, so they took shelter. The Romans, on the other hand, said, "Onward, men! Set sail!
Dum,
We've
da,
got
dum,
to deliver these
dum,
supplies stat."
dum.
But sir, those clouds, don't you think we ought to have learned our lesson by now? Yes, Brian, we ought to have. But
We haven't.
we haven't. Another fleet and 50,000 men
Oh my
lost
gosh.
in another storm.
So like a
Disaster.
250,000 troops
Now,
dead
at this
from
point,
storms.
There still really isn't a clear winner. Sure,
Just
the
stop,
Romans have
Rome.
captured most of Sicily and cornered the Carthaginian land forces at Lilybaeum, but the continued disasters at sea were critically depleting their resources, and without a strong fleet, Rome could not win. Meanwhile, Hamilcar Barca was still knocking about and creating even more problems. So, where do we go from here? How does this war finally end? By now, the two sides had been fighting for 23 years. They were exhausted.
With nothing
Their
to
money,
show.
their resources, their strength
Yeah.
were all utterly spent. The Carthaginians in
See,
particular.
in truly like democratic societies, you would have seen regime changes throw out those people. But it's interesting that having like the consulate like they had in Rome, that they didn't try to support a leader that wanted to end it. I don't know if you just like what the politics of that would be for the consul. Of were they on a platform of like trying to end, like they're gonna keep fighting the war, or they're gonna try to pull out of the war. Obviously it wasn't to pull out of the war, so you wonder how this could continue without public uprisings, or if they just have that much control, right?
Were eager to see the war end. So
And mostly from the Roman perspective, because it's definitely showing itself that this is a war of Roman aggression. The Carthaginians, I mean, they're just trying to hold on.
could get back to trading and making money. So after the latest Roman disaster at sea, they said, look, there ain't no way in heck the Romans can come back again. They can't possibly afford to build another fleet. They're done. That's it. Recall the navy, repurpose them as merchant ships, and let's get back to making some money. Assuming the Romans would
Never
soon
happens
make
like that,
peace, an anti-war faction within the government recalled a large portion of the navy, leaving
no,
Hamilcar
they're
on
vulnerable.
his own. The victors appeared to be declaring themselves victorious.
This is already where you can see where the Romans, of course, aren't going to give up. Now, insanely, Roman military budget was like half of the entire country's budget, over half. Insane amount of money that they put in. I don't know if anything has come close to that. We talk about, today how modern militaries like the United States puts in a lot of money, but like as far as percentage of the income, the Roman have that squashed.
Meanwhile, the vanquished were getting ready for round 5. The Romans built another fleet, this time heavily relying on patriotic donations from the upper
They're to that
classes
point
to
now.
afford it. And once again, they put to sea. Sir, the
when
Romans
you're
have
digging
built
deep.
another fleet. Oh, for goodness sake, Clarence, can't you see I'm busy rolling around in this pile of money? But sir, I don't care anymore, Clarence. I just don't care. The Carthaginian politicians made a fairly lackluster final effort with a poorly built fleet to supply their forces in Sicily. But when the brand new Roman fleet caught them at the Battle of the Aegates, even without their signature
think it's
corvus, they dealt them
Aegates.
the final blow. And that was that. 23 years of war. Neither side could afford to keep fighting, but the Romans showed that they intended to anyway. The Carthaginians had no choice but to throw in
Goodbye,
the towel.
Sicily.
The war had been long and hard for both sides, but in the end, it was Roman determination that won the fight. The Romans had
Yeah.
spent the entire war
They're willing
trying
to lose
find
a
a way
lot.
to deliver the knockout blow. They learned how to build a fleet and engage in naval combat. They developed ingenious new ways of waging war. They attempted an invasion of the Carthaginian heartland, and whenever disasters struck them, they always came back.
Those are
again
such great
and
animations.
again. The Carthaginians, on the other hand, spent the entire war watching whatever Rome did, and then figuring out how to respond. They were much more passive. And so,
They put on
it's
the booty
no wonder
guy.
then that when both sides were close to collapse, Rome was the one who figured out how to go that little bit further.
But is
In
it worth it?
241 BC, the Carthaginian politicians sent word to Hamilcar Barca that he was on his own and could choose to make peace with the Romans if he wished. Hamilcar was stunned. He felt betrayed by the politicians. Some sources say he refused to even negotiate. Nevertheless, terms had to be drawn up. Well, Hammy, I'm glad you
hear it.
Carthaginians have finally come to your senses
Just get out of
and
Sicily,
recognized
right?
who the true winner is. How many fleets did you lose? Okay, here are our terms. You leave Sicily to us and return all of our prisoners. You're not allowed to make war against Syracuse or her allies, and you have to pay us 2,200 talents of silver over the next 20 years. What's a talent of silver? Well, to put it in perspective, in the year 2022, that'll be worth around, let's say, 40 million US dollars. Ay, caramba!
A year?
That will cripple us. Wow, we got a real smart guy over here. Yeah, that's kind of the point, you dingus. Ugh, I guess I have no choice. I accept. Great. Oh, by the way, we changed our minds. You actually have to pay us 3,200 talents of silver over 10 years. Thanks for accepting. Dude, see you later.
They're like 30%.
Hey, you didn't let me say uncool. He didn't let me say uncool. The treaty was extremely punishing, and by switching up the terms at the last minute, they
Pray I
enraged
don't alter
the
the deal
Carthaginians.
further.
But still, one of the longest and deadliest wars at the time was finally over. The Romans had won. They achieved their aim of gaining Sicily, and even though it wasn't part of the peace deal, they took advantage of a weakened Carthage and grabbed Corsica and Sardinia as well.
I hope you're all getting World War I vibes here. Are you getting that? Some Treaty of Versailles stuff, right? They're creating the conditions for another war. This stuff doesn't last forever. No one happily pays off this humiliating treaty and the reparations for it. No, I think we're gonna have another war.
Roman expansion beyond the Italian peninsula had just begun. The Romans hoped that now the Carthaginians would forever be
Carthage,
under
the
their
Germany,
thumb.
though.
Unfortunately, the harsh terms
Well,
they
yeah.
placed on the Carthaginians at the end of the war left a growing anger, one that would come back to haunt them. One day, Carthage will have its revenge. That's nice, dear. I'm serious, woman. Maybe.
Drew?
Carthage will have its revenge. That's nice.
Drew! Yo, we got Drew Durnall, sub to Drew. Dude, that's a huge shout out. Go
Dear.
Drew.
I'm serious, woman. Maybe not in my lifetime, but perhaps
On the screen.
in his. My beautiful son. You are born into a momentous destiny. You shall
Here
be
we go.
Rome's greatest enemy. You'll tear Rome limb from limb. You'll burn their pathetic city into the ground. You'll slaughter their people, men, women, and children.
Pets.
My child, you are vengeance. Stop telling our baby he's vengeance. But he is, Barbara. He's vengeance. That may be so someday, but for now, our son has a name, and you should call him that instead. His name is...
Oh, they're gonna do a second.
Don't
Let's
forget
go.
to play War Thunder now by clicking my link in the description below. Get a huge bonus pack including premium vehicles, boosters, and more. New and existing...
Get the offer. All right, let's wrap this up. All right, I'm so glad he put in that at the end that there is going to be future Punic Wars here, because I mean, you feel like you'd be doing the whole thing injustice if you don't talk about Hannibal crossing the Alps with freaking war elephants. And it really, the later Punic Wars get way crazier. Okay, that was tame compared to what's about to happen. So great, looks like we got a longer series. I just wonder, I wonder if, you know, he has that done yet, or he's, you know, continuing to work on it, whatever. A lot of time went into this. So, you know, I'll wait and I'll watch it. So great. Again, I thought this was a great decision to do the Punic Wars. People love Rome. There's a lot to learn, and I think there's still a lot of people that don't know again about Hannibal and the Carthage. Great choice, having hit so many major wars and conflicts in the world. Good job here. All right, and keeping up with the line of the humor there. I learned a ton. I feel like I had less input maybe in this video than I have in all the other videos. That's just because I was learning so much. But anyway, awesome job. Awesome job, Oversimplified. You're doing great. This is definitely something I hope I can squeeze into my classes. And the kids usually love it, so I'm down. All right, thanks again for everyone for watching. If you have not seen my commentary videos on other Oversimplifieds, there's a bunch. Just look for them. Everyone has been covered. All right, with that, we'll see you next time. Bye.